Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
And let there be football. Welcome in to Move the Chains. I'm your host, Jonathan Bam Rivers. College football, wall-to-wall today. In first down, I want you to understand something, that there's a window that a lot of teams are referred to when it comes to being a champion. And one of the best teams in college football, I truly believe their best season, their best shot to win the title is this year. And in second down, as always, we're going to come and get your social media questions for the landscape of college football in 2024. And in today's nonsense narrative, Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes are seen as overrated by some people. And I'm going to tell you why I just don't agree with that statement. All right, we're going to have all that and much more right here on Move the Chains, but you know how we do it. So let's kick it off with first down. So I'm going to be plain and clear right here. I think 2024 may be Ohio State and, more importantly, Ryan Day's best shot to win the college football national championship. Now, I don't mean that by saying I think they're coming in as the best team in the country. If you ask me who I think should be number one or who's going to win a championship, I would put my money on Georgia. What Kirby Smart and that program has done over the past 3 to 4 years has been phenomenal, and they're not slowing down at all. Remember, Georgia is one of the only programs in college football that can afford to lose players and sometimes still get better as a result of that. So I just want you to take note of that. But when it comes to Ryan Day, I've got a graphic I want to show you for Ryan Day. Ryan Day has been not a good coach, not even a very good coach. I think he's been a great coach while at Ohio State. He's 56-8 in his 5 seasons there. He's 39-3 against the Big Ten. Now, there are a lot of reasons that people have problems with the 39-3 record because all 3 of those losses inside of his conference are to Michigan. All 3 of those losses are to Jim Harbaugh. So when you're Ohio State and you're Ryan Day, no matter how many championships you win, no matter how many Big Ten championships you win, even if you're doing all those things and losing to Michigan, you're going to have people that are doubting you. So if you're not winning Big Ten championships and if you're not winning national championships and you're not beating Michigan, I think that's what's putting Ryan Day in the bind. And we understand he has 2 bowl wins as well, but he has a 2-4 record. Now, why do I think this is Ohio State's best shot? Well, for one, Jim Harbaugh is no longer at Michigan. And you've seen throughout the history of not just college football, but sports in general, there have been many players and coaches that have been unable to win championships due to the fact that they've had somebody who was just a little bit better or who had an edge in some way. Ohio State last year really struggled in the run game, and they really struggled up front when it comes to their offensive line. I don't think that's going to be a problem this year. Ohio State is slated to have one of the best offensive lines, not just in college football, but definitely in the Big Ten. Kyle McCord was their quarterback last year. Let's be honest. Coming off of C.J. Stroud, Kyle McCord wasn't the answer. Kyle McCord wasn't the answer regardless of who you had at quarterback the previous year. So now you've got quarterbacks that are in purgatory. Ohio State now doesn't have to worry about that problem in my estimation, because when you bring in transfers, which Ohio State is continuing to do, not just along the offensive line, but at quarterback with Will Howard coming from Kansas State, you solidify an opportunity for your team to get better. And let's call it what it is, guys. Ohio State is a program that recruits at a high level. And when I mean recruit, they recruit in traditional recruiting at a high level. They go and get some of the best high school seniors from across the country, not just in the Midwest, but they get them from the South, they get them from the West Coast, East Coast, it doesn't matter. But Ohio State also does a great job in the transfer portal. And the transfer portal now, we might as well call it free agency, because I've said this before. High school football is a new college. College is a new NFL, and the NFL that we know now is something we've never seen before. So Ohio State does a phenomenal job in free agency, a.k.a. the transfer portal. And this is another thing I want to bring up about Ohio State. I think we should give Ryan Day and this program credit for being the type of program that high-level transfers want to actually go to. I'm going to give you 2 examples. Quinshon Judkins, running back from Ole Miss, is now on the Ohio State roster and will be a big reason I think Ohio State excels this year. I've watched about 90% of Quinshon Judkins' games at Ole Miss, and there was no doubt in my mind that he was one of the best running backs in the SEC. He runs well with his eyes, he's fast, and even though he's not slender, but he's not as thick as most running backs, he still runs with power. And let's go to Caleb Downs. Let me tell you something. So freshman All-American, unanimous All-American as a freshman at the University of Alabama last year, and I think a lot of the reason he went to Ohio State was because Nick Saban left. But when I was watching Caleb Downs play in the high school state championship game at Mill Creek High School here in Georgia a few years ago, I was watching it with my 2 older sons. And I was telling them, I said, man, this dude at running back is phenomenal. They said, yeah, Dad, he's going to Alabama. And I said, well, he's going to have a lot of competition at running back spot, but I think he'll be okay. They said, no. He starts at safety. He's just playing running back because their starting running back is a little nicked up. So this is a guy who's an All-American safety and can easily be an All-American running back. Oh, and by the way, Caleb Downs has been getting some reps at Ohio State camp this year, and at spring practice, he has been getting some reps at running back. So the way that Ryan Day and this coaching staff is able to go out and pick two of the best players from the best conference in America and add it to their roster is phenomenal. Michigan is going to be good. I don't think they'll be better than Ohio State. And if you're Ryan Day, you do have the UCLAs of the world, the Oregons, the USCs coming into the Big Ten, but this is your conference. You've got all the talent, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jeremiah Smith. A lot of people are talking about Cam Coleman at Auburn, and they should be. Jeremiah Smith is a phenom. If you've seen any tape on him, and he gives guys like Caleb Downs problems, you know that they're going to be great. The only question for Ohio State is, defensively, can they keep up with the offense? I don't think that'll be a problem. I think in the trenches up front when it comes to their offensive and their defensive lines, Ohio State will be second to none this year in 2024, other than Georgia in my estimation. I think Ryan Day's best shot is 2024 because as you progress with these new schools coming from the Pac-12 into the Big Ten, recruiting will get tougher. They'll still be able to do it, but it won't be easier. You have no Jim Harbaugh. You've been in the Big Ten. You've got your transfer quarterback in Will Howard. You've got two of the best athletes coming from the SEC to your program, and you've been able to help solidify that offensive line in recruiting it through the transfer portal. This is Ryan Day's best shot to date to win a national championship. Now I want to see if they get it done. All right, that's it for this segment. When we come back, we're going to have your social media questions. We'll be back and we'll move the chains right after this. And welcome back into the show. And as always, before I get to second down, I want to take the time to thank you, the fans, for watching Move the Chains. Whether you're watching on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54 or you're checking out the YouTube channel, it's a blessing to be a part of this. And also, I have to make sure that I give a shout out to the best production crew in the game. Before every show during the week, we're putting things together. I have ideas of what I want for segments, and they're bringing you all the VO, they're bringing you all the video, they're bringing you all the still shots, they're bringing you all the interviews and the graphics. The production crew is phenomenal, so I'd be remiss if I didn't give them a shout out. But hey, you know what it is. It's your social media questions right here on Move the Chains. I love to hear everything that you love, and I love to hear everything that you disagree with. That's what I'm built for. So without further delay, let's go ahead and get the second down. All right, let's get right into it. What's the first question I have today? All right, Eric W. asks, is Dabo Swinney's philosophy on NIL and the transfer portal going to hurt him moving forward? Eric, great question. So before I answer the question, let me give everybody a synopsis on what Dabo Swinney's philosophy on NIL and the transfer portal is. He doesn't like it. Point blank, he doesn't like it. Dabo Swinney is a guy who is opposed necessarily to making sure that players have enough money to stay at Clemson. He has built his program from the ground up, which he has. He's been an individual that since 2018, they've had a top 10 recruiting class every year. They haven't worked worse than 10th. And we understand what they've done, winning national championships, being in multiple national championship game appearances. Dabo Swinney's done a phenomenal job in building this program. However, I will say this. When you don't and when you are unwilling to change, it can have a negative effect on your program. I'm all for Dabo Swinney being convicted in his approach to building this team from the ground up. But you have to understand that the landscape of college football is changing. The transfer portal is making teams better quicker, and it's also taking players away from you that you may have had 2 or 3 years ago. So Dabo Swinney can have his philosophy, but he has to understand that his philosophy may not put Clemson where he wants him to be moving forward. All right, what do we have next? Jackson B. asks, is it fair that Notre Dame can't receive an automatic bid until the college football playoff? Jackson is 100% fair because Notre Dame is an independent. Notre Dame is not affiliated with any conference in college football, and you know whose fault that is? Notre Dame's. And I'm not telling them that they shouldn't do it. Notre Dame has an exclusive deal with TV stations like NBC, and they get paid a whole bunch of money for doing that. More power to you. But when it comes to college football playoff, and you have to be one of the 5 top conference champions to get an automatic bid, you're not in that category. That's your fault. You can play all the ACC teams you want. You can play all the Big 12 or all the SEC teams that you want in the non-conference schedule because all you have is a non-conference schedule. That's fine. You will likely be a college football playoff participant in the next year or two with the 12-team college football playoff format, but you won't have an automatic bid because you are unaffiliated with a conference. And if you're Notre Dame, that's what you wanted, so you got to take it where it is. All right? Harold T. asked, and this is a good transition from a Notre Dame question, has LSU taken a step back with Brian Kelly? And you know that Brian Kelly is the former head coach at the University of Notre Dame. And to answer your question, I don't think LSU's taking a step back. Now, for all of those detractors that will say, well, man, in 2019, they were undefeated and won a national championship. Can I just say that 2019, Ed Orgeron was the head coach. No shade on Ed Orgeron. But you know who LSU had on that squad? Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, Grant Delpit, Greedy Williams. And I'm talking about first-round NFL talent littered everywhere. Now, Brian Kelly himself had a Heisman Trophy winner and a number 2 overall pick in Jane Daniels last year, who's now with the Washington franchise in the NFL. But Brian Kelly has won 10 games, his first 10 years at LSU, 2 years at LSU. I think this is an opportunity for him to continue to develop this program and put his stamp on it. Now, I have seen things from Brian Kelly that have kind of made me concerned when it comes to some play calling, when it comes to decision making, but you learn those things. Brian Kelly is a good coach, he's a smart coach, and now he's not necessarily hindered in recruiting like he was at Notre Dame regarding his academic standards. No shot on LSU's academic standards, but they're not what Notre Dame's were. He will continue to have talent, he will continue to build talent, and he's going to have to if he wants to be competitive in the SEC and in the landscape of college football. All right, that's it for your questions right here on Move the Chains. When we come back, my nonsense narrative, and I'm going to touch on why Colorado on some people's minds is overrated and why that's the wrong mindset to have. We'll be back when we Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back into Move the Chains. I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. You know what time it is. It's my favorite segment of the show. My favorite segment of the show. I love this idea that was birthed from my creative team, being myself, my wife, my kids, production team. I love this nonsense narrative segment, and I think it's going to take us a long way in being able to pick out what we see is wrong when it comes to mindsets and conversations when it comes to football at the collegiate level and NFL level. So let's go ahead and get to it, man. Run the nonsense narrative. Let's go. Colorado's overrated. That's not me. That's the narrative that I hear a lot of times. Colorado's overrated. So let me first start by saying this. I want to commend University of Colorado for bringing in a coach like Deion Sanders. A lot of people were afraid to bring in a guy like Deion, a guy who's brash, a guy who's unapologetically himself. People think he's arrogant. I think Deion's very confident, and I know Deion has a lot of shortcomings as a head coach. I'm one of his biggest fans, and I'm going to sit here and be objective and tell you I know he has a lot of shortcomings as a head coach. Deion can absolutely get better as a head coach, but I think you won't find 2 or 3 better coaches for this program specifically than a Deion Sanders. And the reason I say they're not overrated is because I had a different mindset going into last year than a lot of people did. Think about it this way. I thought, and I wish I had this show previously so you know this is just not me having revisionist history. I really thought Colorado wouldn't win more than 5 or 6 games last year. They had 1 win in 2022, ladies and gentlemen, 1. And in that season, they weren't even that competitive. So the fact that they won 4 games last year was an improvement. And I know a lot of people thought Deion would come in 1 year and make sure that this program was turned around. That wasn't the case. If you watched Colorado football last year, their offensive line was one of the worst offensive lines in the history of college football. Now, I may be speaking in hyperbole there, but they were bad. If you look at the statistics, you look at the metrics, look at the play on the field, they weren't good at all. And the fact that Colorado was able to compete the way they competed last year, I think says a lot about the program and the infrastructure. And I think the first thing Deion was able to do was bring in a coaching staff that understands these young men in this generation. That's smart. And these are coaches that he said 8-10 years ago, hey, whenever I get the job at a top-tier program, you're coming with me. And he kept his word on that. And they're trying to develop some things. Now, they have lost guys like Kamani McLean to Florida, and they lost Dylan Edwards as well. I think as freshmen, they were going to be cornerstones of this program, but Deion understands that as a head coach and as a program, you build around individual talent, but it can't just rest on individual talent. Because if that were the case, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders would have gotten them more than 4 wins last year. But he understands that he had to bolster that offensive and defensive lines, especially the interior. So while Colorado isn't jumping off anybody's screen when it comes to recruiting with high school kids, he's number 8 when it comes to the transfer portal. And Deion understands the landscape of what I called it earlier, free agency, being a Hall of Famer in the NFL. Colorado is not overrated. Now, I will also tell you this. They're not underrated. I think people who are critical of this program for some of the things that they're critical of in terms of their play on the field, I can agree with that. I just said I can agree defensively they couldn't stop the run. I can agree that defensively last year they didn't seem to have a gap sound type mentality, and they were out of position a lot of times, which is why Colorado gave up so many big plays. But everything else that Deion is doing, the aura that he's bringing around this program, the excitement that he's bringing around this program, all of that stuff is warranted because that's how you build programs these days. And I'm not saying it's the only way, and that's another thing I want you to realize as a fan and as an observer of college football. Programs can be built in a multitude of ways. We're seeing it done. Nick Saban built his program one way. Dabo Swinney built his program one way. Ryan Day is building his program one way. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss is building his program one way. And Deion Sanders is building his program one way. Now, will it end in championships? Let's wait and see. Because the Big 12 is now expanded. We understand that Colorado will be a team to be reckoned with. But there's also the expansion of the college football playoff. I won't be shocked if I see the Colorado Buffaloes trying to make a spot from that 12 to 15 range. They may be around the 15th ranked team in the nation with the last 2 or 3 games of the season and have an opportunity to get into the playoff. But even if they don't, the program is still progressing, especially if they win 6 or 7 games this year and become bowl eligible. All right, that's it from a nonsense narrative. When we come back, it'll be the final drive. We'll be back when we'll move the chains right after this. And welcome back into the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final segment of the show, so you know what that means. It's time for the final drive. I don't want you to get it twisted. The College Football Playoff Committee will still face a lot of criticism, even with the format expanding to 12 teams. I don't want you to be under the disillusion that because there are 3 times more teams now in the playoff system, that the committee still won't face backlash. Because I think now seeding will be an issue. I think because it will matter. Because I guarantee you there will be 1 or 2 teams that don't get automatic bids in the college football playoff that will have to play a team in the first or the second round of the college football playoff that some people will deem unfair to the higher ranked team, either because they played them before or because it's a bad matchup. That's the way it goes. So the playoff committee will still face criticism, but I think it'll be more for seeding as opposed to teams that are in. All right, like I always say, hey, don't just check out Move the Chains on the Sports Leader, WXTX Fox 54. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. You can subscribe to the channel. It's at @move_the_chains. Make sure you leave a comment for your chance to have a question answered on the show. I love to hear your feedback as a fan, so make sure, again, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's at @move_the_chains. All right, for everybody in production, it's your boy Jonathan Bam Rivers. Another great show here, and until next time I Move the Chains, God bless.